teaching his religion, he said, remember he was playing off like Zappa does on cliche phrases. We're going to know where it's at because we know which way it went. Remember that conversation? Those lyrics?
Yeah.
Where was that?
I remember that last week.
So he had the same scenario and a different ending. What is the ending? The Hudson Toot, I don't think he's taken over the planet. He's just become a pimp. He's just satisfied. Well, he maybe never wanted to take over the planet. And Drachma is reduced to being a whole, a servicing whole. HOLE, just a hole for people. Let's see, where is the grammar? The grammar lesson. So this is very light. So we are going to go to the Demeras book, which has all these scripts. They're all going to be lumped together in this new book, where Frank says those interested in the conceptual continuity or are familiar with a lot of things, we're going to find it all put together. So it was Bob's job to make order out of it. Yeah, here it is. Dirk says, that's right, I have a promotional idea that will prove once and for all how heavy we are, talking to his meditating cult, and simultaneously show conclusive evidence to every infidel and unbeliever not only where we're at, but also where we're coming from. Now, he gets them to go to space, to go to outer space and go to the Drachma's rock or planet, and the Forstlings object to it, but he zaps them, sort of like Captain Beefheart, just travels them through time and space. But he says, we're going to do something up there so that when we come back, we'll be a bona fide religion. So he says, we're...
Yes, but actually he's portraying what is happening now, like this side sees the others as the infidels, and we are heavier than you. And the other side has this same attitude, and it's so absurd, and he's making a satire of that. And it's amazing.
Yes.
We don't need these endangered aliens to come and try to conquer Earth. It's like humans are actually the ones that are attacking humans. So that's even more horrible.
And he says when they become a bona fide religion at the end of this treatment, this screenplay, they'll all be able to go to airports and hand out leaflets. Now, that's just beginning in L.A. in the late 60s, early 70s. The cults, Scientology,
the Hare Krishnas.
Other cults, Hare Krishnas, they're all starting to hand out leaflets, and this is driving Frank nuts. I mean, he's trying to run a revolution and educate everybody and get them to go to the library and figure out what's going on and not be dupes. And the stupidity is spreading around him as little cults spring up handing out leaflets. So he's lashing out at what's happening in his world right there in 71, 72 in L.A.
Debris.
Yes, the cosmic debris, right.
Debris.
So we're going to find out where we're at, but also where we're coming from. Dirk says, I have meditated longly and deeply, and in doing so I have penetrated to the very core of this marginally imponderable dilemma. It's only marginally imponderable. And I have found the answer. And the answer is, quote, the difference between where you're at and where you're coming from is where you went. The difference between where you're at and where you're coming from is where you went. He used to say in the late 80s that it's not, I don't know what. He said it's when. The big question was when.
This is amazing because that's what Ian is saying all the time. It's like,
yes,
there is no time.
Ian has made fun. Ian has
really
said things like that.
Back. Because,
right. He would make fun of directional.
Like we're going.
They were going sideways.
And he's always playing with the arness and the isness and the went and the
That's right. That's why when I start reading this, you know what? Let me say this. When I read this kind of stuff by Zappa, and then we point out how Ion does it, I said, that fucking Ion is just zapping, just reading Bob's mind and completing it. Just going a little further than Frank did.
Yeah.
It's uncanny. We find, he was playing with it, doing it, and then we find out, shit, it's all in the scripts of the Holy Offices. It's like Ion scanned me, figured out all the fucking thoughts I engaged, and then just spewed it all back with a speeded up completion. It's pretty amazing.
Yes, it is.
I'm sure he said at one point the difference between where you're at and where you're coming from is where you went. I would not be surprised that you'll find that in some old cash flow. This is what's funny about this. And then he says, so they're going to go to the moon. And he says, precisely. When we get back from when we went, everybody will know where we're at. When we get back from when we went, and before it was is where you went, now it's when you went, everybody will know where we're at. So he didn't tell them then that they would have to go to the moon, and they were quite shocked later. He says, well, here's the plan. We're all going to the moon, or to some rock, mystery rock, where Drachma was. So Dirk wanders off. He fades into nothing. Drachma is trapped in a brothel, and Hunsentoot's doing okay, and is that all? And the Forcelings, I don't know, maybe they were killed. I don't know what happened to the Forcelings. Let's see.
They got their drops and ascended.
Yeah. Let's see. What happened is that very carefully the Forcelings grouped themselves around Hunsentoot, waiting reverently with bowed heads until Dirk gives the secret signal, like Frank would give secret signals, whereupon they pounce on the unsuspecting spider and rip off all of his arms and legs except the practical ones, tossing them around the stage while the orchestra plays some terrifying passage. Strobes flash, and Drachma stands near the sofa looking aghast as the scene blacks out and the lights come up on the narrator. So they ripped him apart, and I think he liked it. He didn't object too much to that. It says, and so with an exhilarating religious fervor, the Forcelings come to the assistance of the distraught Hunsentoot, relieving him of the very cause of his deep-seated emotional problem, as symbolized by his wriggling little spring-loaded appendages, plunging headlong into the abyss of his insexual distress, in order to liberate him in much the same manner their dismal competitors had attempted for countless centuries on earth, acting in the sincere belief that they, the Forcelings, after so many inept bunglings by those other benevolent foundations, would finally get it right. We return you now to outer space for the results of their labors. And we already read that. And we end up. What did the Forcelings, are they around in the end scene? I don't see them mentioned. Hunsentoot Dresser swore. Well, the Forcelings are trying to save Dirk from being hypnotized by the watch. That's the last thing they're engaged. They're trying to save their leader, and they fail. It says Dirk stumbles blindly into the wings, fetishing his watch. And doesn't say any more about the Forcelings. So, the Concentration Moon. You heard me play that song, Concentration Moon, eh? Did you like that? From We're Only for the Money?
Yes.
Concentration Moon. Moon Unit. I wonder if Moon has ever thought about the conceptual continuity and how her name fits into it. If I ever see her, I'll ask her that. You know that you're just a fragment of a larger theatrical layout by Frank? You're one of the themes? See what she says. I'm on her Facebook. I don't know. Maybe I have to become a member. I will ask her. I can present this on her Facebook page.
Yeah.
I will be quickly banned with my rudeness. But we're used to that. The rest of the people will see it, and they'll know the value of what I did.
Because you're so heavy, Edling boy.
Yes, the wimplings. The Ionettes are wimplings. Cannot even come up with something to ask Ion. Wimplings. Not you two. The rest of them. They don't even show up anymore because Ion ain't here. We are people still listening on the computer, but the turnout here when Ion's not around really shows you what this is all about. It ain't about Carol and Bob's charisma. It's about Ion. It's the only thing worth showing up for. They put up with us. Looking at Sarah, she asked, I wonder if the dissonant ambient funk was recorded separately from the dialogue. Probably. She goes, ooh, John Cage and Norman McLaren. Norman McLaren was an animator for the National Film Board. Then she goes, Verez. Then she goes, Roxy Harmonium. Triad of fourth and fifth. Then she says cadence. Then number 125 says, Dirk, did Frank write Boogie Nights? Remember Dirk Diggler? I saw Boogie Nights. Then he says, Four Slings. Then he says, Bob, you're so country. Everybody talks to everybody in the country. Oh, I'm a country person. I'm a rural overalls wearing person.
You're the Marlboro Man.
Marlboro Man. Yeah, ride into town and make friends with everybody and hand out cigarettes. 125 says, quote, ripped off all his arms and legs except for the practical ones. Ha, ha, ha. They like that line. The Four Slings knew which ones not to rip off. Now, our task is this awesome book called Demeras, subtitled The Book by Frank Zappa, and has a picture of Frank with his chest hairs, no shirt on, and he has a nice, I don't know, a 40s hobo kind of suit jacket. And he's got straggly hair. It's 1984. And he's holding up his hand in a green glove. Demeras, Frank Zappa, copyright 1984, all rights reserved. He says, forward, this cheesy little homemade book was prepared for the amusement of people who already enjoy Zappa music. It is not for intellectuals or other dead people. It is designed to answer one of them.
You have to get happy or get out.
Yeah.
So for your entertainment.
I mean, Roxy was just starving in Berlin. There was no more live people. She was surrounded by dead people. She wasn't sure if that's what was happening, but now she could see that is what was happening. And so he says, the book is designed to answer one of the more troubling questions related to conceptual continuity. Quote, how do all these things that don't have anything to do with each other fit together, forming a larger absurdity? Well, I think my pattern of the concentration camp is what we're going to see here. Your enjoyment, no, not exactly that. It's going to be updated. It says, your enjoyment of the contents could be enhanced by hearing the music described in the text. The album shown on the back cover contains some of these songs. It's got 4 albums. Francesco Zappa's album called Demeras, Zappa's Old Masters Collection, and Thingfish. Other songs derived from Joe's Garage and Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch. This is a storybook. It is not a rock and roll biography. This is the only real and official Frank Zappa book. All other books attempting to trade on my name are unauthorized and full of misinformation. This book is dedicated to all of the fans who have made the last 20 years of large-scale absurdities possible. This book, see, large-scale absurdities. This book used to be called Christmas in New Jersey. Now, I read that last week, so I hope you can handle that. So it starts off with Francesco, 250 years ago, talking to the Duke of York, and we went through that. Then Francesco meets up with Shemp the alchemist, and then they go to Broadway. They go to New York, 1984. We figured out that Francesco is Frank. Frank is telling us that he's like Beefheart, a real phenomenon of the mystery landscape, and way more than people suspect. And he's lived for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. Then we went into the beginning of the universe, where Uncle Willie. It says Uncle Willie is seen relaxing on a grotesquely tufted maroon sofa, smoking a cigar. On his knee is the dummy, now with a face just like his, like Uncle Willie's, dressed in a flowing white miniature robette. Well, reading one of the Zappa books, when Frank was 7 or 8 or 6 years old, he would take Carl, who was the second brother. Bobby was a few years. Carl might have been 9 years, 8 years younger than Frank, whereas Bobby was only 3 years younger. So this younger brother, he would sit him on his lap and do puppetry or ventriloquism, fake ventriloquism. The very thing that Uncle Willie is doing with the dummy is what Frank did with his little brother. Interesting point, right? He entertained the family with this, improvising stuff, whatever the young mind would come up with. So there's you have Zappa is sitting there thinking about how he used to have his brother on his lap. Then he said, okay, now it's 40 years later. We're surrounded by organic robotoids. So at best I'm going to be a weird duck thing called weird pervert called Uncle Willie, and I'm not going to have my little brother. I'm going to have a fucking automated dummy on my lap, right? So he's updating what he did, what the scenarios of his life, overlaid large-scale absurdities.
Yes, and you also mentioned before this that under the electric environment and the android meme, everybody became this type of organic robotoid.
Yes. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a cyborg. Most humans are in this state of organic robotoid situation.
That was in the Gutenberg galaxy. Everybody was a robot by, 1600, 1700. The print visual space contained human.
Even before electricity, we were already organic robotoids.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I said the Gutenberg galaxy. I'm talking 500 years ago was when we became organic robots. And we became angelic. He writes in, posthumously published, so we don't know how much he wrote, but it could be considered it. But Bruce Powers, not Bruce Powell, but Bruce Powers, former CIA guy, he's a professor at Niagara University in upstate New York. He was one of the last guys to engage McLuhan. In his book, he talks about angels versus robotism, angelism versus robots. And angelism seems to be aligned with the Gutenberg galaxy, and robotism is the electric fate. But McLuhan said in 1968 that robots were a product of visual space. So it could be it could be a case of Hyndaides, one by means of two. But yes, the electric age is implying a liberation from the robot world. You had to be a robot to listen to Ed Sullivan every day, every Sunday. Once you have digital do-it-yourself media, you aren't in the dancing to the same tune as everybody else.
Yes, they will say same program in the same channel at the same time.
Right.
Like everybody will just program their lives to adapt to the TV program. Yeah. And now you said with the video recorder, TV was made for the video recorders that were taping the program.
They're watching it. Okay, so the dummy wants to bring in the short girl and squat the magical pig. Now, Frank in 70, 71, 72, that would be, he broke up the mothers and then he reformed them with Flo and Eddie from the Turtles and put in a couple of new musicians like George Duke. So they went around 70, 71 acting out this weird scenario of the big sofa and short girl and squat the magical pig. Did little sketches. And the sofa was there at the beginning of the universe. So that's in this book. So that's an early theatrical performance piece. So that's developed a little bit. I can't read all the details, but then that's the end of chapter 1. Uncle Willie, this is where old Zircon, at the end of chapter 1, Uncle Willie says, darkness fell suddenly in all forests as cancelled leeches and transoms swarmed ashore, devouring bushes while they slept. Farmers walked off and got lost because there was no stars, not even the moon. Then, from a distant cave, there's the cave thing again, the measured tread of cloven hoof on darkened gravel. Old Zircon, the phased-out Byzantine devil, dressed in a costume of that period except for his feet. There's your Pergamon obsession, Roxy, the Whore of Babylon, or the King of Babylon. Old Zircon. So he's including ancient religion, hocus pocus. They have the exterior of old Zircon's cave set in a dark, barren landscape of infinite gravel. Old Zircon says, looks like the leeches have ate up every bush. Bet this place will look funny when the lights go back on. Old Zircon launches into a charming sort of cloven hoof tap dance routine, producing sparks which ignite the local moss. An enormous bonfire, totally out of proportion to the amount of fuel available, springs up around him. Uncle Willie and the dummy stand nearby unnoticed. I remember reading this last week. You guys remember this?
Yes.
Yeah. Uncle Willie.
I remember Uncle Willie.
Yeah. Uncle Willie says, old Zircon danced his, quote, special dance until sparks ignited all adjacent moss. One by one, dangerous-looking unknown animals make their way to Zircon's fire. With a snap of his fingers, he produces an assortment of primitive musical instruments and proceeds to do his version of a Las Vegas lounge act for them. For the animals, I guess. Uncle Willie says, all fierce and murderous beasts assembled to a large red fire just outside the cave. Old Zircon beat his special drum, blew his special horn, and strummed his special guitar. Then he sang in a deep voice until the smoke turned to stone, forming several lumpy new mountains. So his voice altered the landscape around him, one of which could talk.
Yeah,
so then
the frequency...
Right.
Until the
He's creating.
Became stone.
Yeah.
Ah!
Smoke to
right.
stone.
The Zircon is one of these old ascended guys who knows how to manipulate his mouth to make realities. So in chapter 2, it goes into Billy the Mountain, and that story is on Just Another Band from L.A., 1971, and Billy the Mountain. So it lays out the Billy the Mountain story. And Billy the Mountain wants to go on a vacation, takes his wife, Ethel, the tree, and they trudge across the desert, destroying everything. So it's another destructive motif, another monster wrecking the human scale. So that goes on for a while. And then there starts to be TV broadcasters. So Frank would take sort of well-known names locally or different situations, and the character would be almost George Putnam. So instead of having the character be George Putnam, he would say almost George Putnam or almost Barbara Walters. These were characters. And almost George Putnam is talking about the destruction that Billy the Mountain's making. Jerry Lewis holds a telethon to raise funds for all the crashed places that Billy the Mountain caused. Is Frank mean a metaphor for what he's doing? Is he crashing things like a monster? Then you bring in the other character of that era, Studebaker Hawk, superhero of the current economic slump. And I think we did him. Then there's a little throwback to Squat and the Short Girl, Old Zircon. Then it gets into the next character after Studebaker Hawk. It gets into Gregory Peccary, and he's a Trend-Monger. He manufactures new trends. So that becomes the content, already was the content of the Baby Snakes video where Bruce Bickford made all this amazing clay animation following Gregory Peccary's scenario. So that was written up 12, 13 years before Now, my first checkoff. So Frank is going to deal with the same idea that there's no time, or time cancels itself out, so we're not going anywhere. So in Gregory Peccary, in his trend-mongering office, invents the calendar. So here's Frank coming at time at another way. And with that, old Zircon says, and with that, Gregory turned and strode nonchalantly into his dinky little office with the desk and the catalog and the very hip water pipe, and proceeded with a vigor and determination known only to piglets of a similarly diminutive proportion, proceeded to single-handedly invent the calendar. Old Zircon says, Gregory Peccary, his eyes rolled heavenward, and his shiny little pig hoofs on the desk. With his eyes rolled heavenward, and his shiny little pig hoofs on the desk, Gregory ponders the significance of eternity and fractional divisions thereof, as mysterious angelic voices sing to him from a great distance, providing the necessary clues for the construction of a thrilling new trend. Sounds like me making my chart. And my chart is an attempt to enter time, right, and lay out changes in duration, in the duration of spans. So Zircon says, and thus the calendar, in all of its colorful disguises, was presented to the bored and miserable people everywhere. Gregory issued a memo on it, whereupon the entire contents of the stenopool identified with it strenuously and worshipped it, the memo, as a way of life. Or maybe they worshipped the calendar, maybe that's what it meant. And took their little pills by it, and went back and forth from work by it, and paid their rent by it, and before long they were even having birthday parties at the office by it. Because now at last, Gregory Peccary's exciting new invention had made it possible for everyone to find out how old they were. See, there's your programming of the environment. That's Frank looking at a new invention and showing how it altered people, conditioned their behavior, but all the time fitting into the concepts he laid out 20 years earlier in Cat and Beefheart versus the Grunt People in terms of no time. Right? Do you get that?
Yes.
Yes. Now, Gregory...
no, he was really into a bigger agenda of just being a rock star. That's something...
Right. McLuhan writes about how Erasmus hijacked the printing press to make a new kind of classroom education. Like Zappa says, holy shit, I'm this talented musician. I can go into pop culture and wreak havoc on it. Because if I play good enough music, they'll let me do it. So he was like the siren, as you said before, in Ulysses Travels. His guitar, his music could get an audience that he could then play with. So old Zircon says, unfortunately, there were people who simply did not wish to know, how old they were. And that's why on his way home from the office one night, Gregory was attacked by a rage of hunchmen. Hunchentupa, these are hunchmen. Making his way through the evening traffic, Gregory notices that the other vehicles which crowd and bump his little red car are all inhabited by slowly aging, very hip young people. That's me and Carolyn, slowly aging, right? Very hip young people. So again, he's making fun of me, who appear to be casting sinister glances toward Gregory through their glinting, acid burnt-out eyeballs, trying to run him off the road or make him bump into something, giving strong evidence of hostile aggression. To elude them, Gregory takes the short forest exit off the expressway. They zoom after him in all manner of cars, trucks, garishly painted buses, and motorcycles. Gregory takes a bumpy trail off the main short forest road, which leads him up the side of a famous and conveniently placed mountain, into a strange cave on the edge of a cliff, not far from a little twisted tree, with eyes on it. Meanwhile, the enraged hunchmen and hunchwomen rumble through the short forest until, realizing the little swine had escaped, they decide to park their steaming vehicles in a circular pseudo-wagon train formation and have a love-in. So there it is. There's the Celestials' agenda. Now it's part of the culture in America. Because under the influence of a fantastic amount of trendy chemical amusement aid, these hunchmen and hunchwomen, they perform lewd acts, rip each other off for small personal possessions, and dance with depraved abandon in the vicinity of a 6-foot pile of transistor radios, each one tuned to a different station. So, Zircon is dealing with Gregory. Then the greatest living philosopher shows up, Quentin Robert de Nameland. And he is in some of the skits of this period we're talking about in the early 70s. Quentin Robert de Nameland. See, you got the modified singing cowboys doing stuff. Uncle Willie doing stuff with the dummy. Studebaker Hawk. He falls off the mountain, gets injured. Billy the Mountain wrecks him for a while. Then you go into Chapter 3. We did this. Buddy is dealing with the scientist named Hertzberg, and they were looking at the new machine called P to E conversion. I have ticked off here. Well, let's look at it another way. Time is not like what people think it is. It doesn't start over here and then go over there. Time is just one big lump of stuff. Everything is happening all the time. I can prove it to you. When you're watching TV on Channel 9, there's always something else on Channel 5, right? Now, have you guys gone? Still there?
No. Yes.
Good.
We're here listening.
Yeah, we did that. We did that Channel 9, Channel 5 stuff. So, so a lot of stuff about particles and chopping up waves, the physics of that, which is Zappa filling out what he said back in 1970.
But I like the phrase you said before, this trendy
Trend-Monger.
Trendy chemical entertainment. Like, I never thought about it, but we always have, besides what we call entertainment, there are these substances that
yes,
most people engage to relax and to have fun. It's not only the entertainment, but the substance plays a big role in the societies.
Yeah, what is that? That's people not wanting to talk to each other, so they must occupy their mouths with confection, is it called? Comestibles to
consumable.
So they
combustibles.
No, there's something called comestibles or something. I don't use that word too much. Remember looking it up about 6 months ago. Anyways, they have to keep their mouths busy. So as they get more and more leisure industry activities, leisure society, they're involved with people, got to interact. But if you're drinking, smoking, eating, you don't have to talk as much. That's my present interpretation of your scenario there.
Yeah, the chemical entertainment.
Yes. So Uncle Willie had died, crashed in the Christmas tree, but then he came back. So Buddy Wilson is trying to figure out how to explain it to his children. So he says, to mess with anything natural, if you mess with anything natural and you can believe there's going to be something supernatural coming out of it, every time they run that machinery over there, they could be messing up our entire chronological ozone layer. And when you mess around with somebody's chronology, you stand a very good chance of putting that sucker out of sequence. Somebody that's already been here before might come back. So he's doing that. And they propose, with Buddy's ability to bring ghosts back, that they bring in Elvis Presley and Jimi Hendrix. Then the Joe's Garage scenario, where everybody's criminalized and music is outlawed. so people can be controlled and categorized. Our criminal institutions are full of little creeps like you who do wrong things, and many of them were driven to these crimes by a horrible force called music. So Zappa in the late 70s was writing about music as becoming a figure of terrorism. That's because we're about to move into the extreme Android meme extension of MTV, of television, which would affect the music industry, a big deal. So, like Frank is defending the oral culture, the musical culture, before he adapts to MTV. He's saying that they're going to outlaw music. Maybe just a phase of paranoia on Frank's part.
Well, but in a way they already did with this short format. Like he was finding this amazing music on his own, but he was surprised that it was not presented on the media.
Right.
So in a way they already have this type of subtle censorship of real music. They're promoting only the music that goes with the substances that sell.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and Zappa used to say that whatever substances were being used would determine the kind of musical climate, the type of hits. So he then goes into a lot of Joe's Garage stuff about the dilemma of, what is her name? Mary. Mary's a Catholic girl. She gets bored with her little town, gets bored with Joe. So she goes on the road with the Mothers or a band. Doesn't say particularly the Mother's Invention, but it does name some of the members who were in there at one time or another. And Larry, remember Larry from the Pony World, 20 years before, he's a character in this Joe's Garage part. Who is Larry? Also, there's much commentary by the Central Scrutinizer in this period. Larry. Larry singing, we could jam. So who is this Larry guy? Don't see where Larry comes from. So maybe he just popped in. We're not supposed to know that he was with the Green Women for a while. The Green Cult. So Mary goes and becomes a crew slut, and then she ends up in the first part when she's going to the Catholic club. She's mentored by Father Riley. Well, Father Riley gets defrocked, and he ends up in Miami, someplace leading wet T-shirt contests, and that's how he and Mary re-meet. So, still Joe stuff. Joe's in jail. He gets pluked, constantly pluked, and the Central Scrutinizer says, so Joe's learned how to speak German. He goes into this place and he sees these little kitchen machineries dancing around with each other. And he sees this one that looks like it's a cross between the industrial vacuum cleaner and a chrome piggy bank with marital aid stuck all over its body. It's really exciting. And when he sees it, he bursts into song. So the industrial vacuum cleaner was seen dancing on the cover of Chunga's Revenge in 1970, that album. So this song is called Fuck Me, I'm Clean. You get that? Fuck Me, I'm Clean. And it introduces the robot Cyborg. And Cyborg's hanging out with Joe and maybe Larry. and Central School.
But we see how this the coitus team comes back very important in A&M.
Yes. Very what?
Important in A&M.
The coitus. Well, Frank's ambivalent. He's making fun of all the coitus going on. Like Cyborg, he actually gets broken. Cyborg, the automated something, he gets pluked here and there, and it's always getting broken, screwed up. So Frank is dealing with the disservices of the counterculture he had a little influence on. It's now the ground has changed. The counterculture ain't what it used to be. It's not as relevant as a counterculture. And Frank's looking how to be in any environment. He's determined to be a solitary artist, so he gets influenced by me and keeps coming up with new stuff that we make relevant. We attempt to translate into public mortar. Frank just keeps pumping out the data. So I have ticked off here. Joe's saying, this is exciting. I never pluked a tiny chrome-plated machine that looks like a magical pig with marital aids all stuck all over it, such as yourself before. So, back 8 years before, the pig and squat and the sofa were happening. Well, the pig theme comes back with Joe's Garage at the end of the 70s. I have ticked off this. Joe picks up the dummy, flicking bits of cake spew off the side of his mouth. The camera pans left to find Uncle Willie seated at a small control console with cables running across the soundstage floor connected to the rear end of Cyborg. So there's the programming committees. Uncle Willie's got some technical version of it. The lyrics of a song are, blow job, give me that blow job, give me the chromium cob. Would you write that stuff, Bert?
No.
Are we looking at a deranged mind here, fetishizing body processes, damaged by the Pope?
Well, he's using shock value for a point.
Yeah, and the president is Interior Oval Office, the president, with his handkerchief wadded up over the receiver. He's attempting to talk in a low voice. Steam rises from a freshly served hot toddy near the jar of jelly beans on the desk. Reagan liked jelly beans. And the president's doing a Wyndham Lewis. He's calling up people randomly. So he says to this anonymous person, your mother sucks cocks in hell. Would this have been allowed to happen? Would the people who arrested Lenny Bruce, would they end up redoing it with Frank? Having the president saying your mother sucks cocks in hell? That's all they have, just that. We're just supposed to get a glimpse of the president doing his business. Then we go back to Cyborg's apartment, and one of the characters is, get this, another swipe at me. Another mocking of me. The character is, where'd it go? Oh yeah, in L.A. earlier in the early '70s scripts, L. Ron Hoover, the leader of the Church of Appliantology. Just a second, I'll look for this disgusting theme. Okay, why is it lost? Here it is. Cyborg shares an apartment with a modified gay Bob doll. Gay Bob doll. Why? Why, Frank? What, did I hurt your feelings? Why have me in and out of the fucking movie scripts? Bob guy, gay Bob doll. What's that? What's that about, Frank? So we go now to chapter 4. There's 11 chapters. and this is the central scrutinizer. Now, Father Riley B. Now Joe is in jail, and Father Riley B. Jones. Is that the same? What was the father called before? Still looking for the name of the priest. Still looking. Yeah, it's Father Riley, same name. Okay, Father Riley B. Jones. So he's trying to administer to Joe, who's now in prison for making music. So that's still the Joe's Garage stuff. Now, Buddy becomes sort of like a Zappa character, like Billy Sweeney. He builds things. His device to bring people back from the dead. He gets irritated by the device after a while. The social disservices. He can't be left alone. He must have a public role for changing the lives of everybody with the new technology. We'll probably be the only people that hide from our inventions. We will not want to take credit for it. Right? Can you dig that?
Yeah.
They've gone stealth. So we're now there's a big fight in the Madison Square Garden. It's between the real Jesus and I think Mr. Zircon. But maybe Zircon, is he too old? Yeah, it's says the big fight. Old Zircon imitates Hitler's jolly jig, delivering a devastating punch which duplicates the angle and velocity of the Hertzberg-Bemmelmann Sig High. So the velocity of their Sig High salute is matched by the angle of Zircon's punch. But where was that? There's also a bit about Mr. Bemmelman's. If you were following Hollywood scandals in the 80s, Bemmelman's was a big studio director, and he got caught stealing money or something. So the other place, okay. In the glare of some horrible unknown beam, we see expressions of panic on the faces of the four scientists. One of them yells, "Shut it off, for God's sake." Scientist 2 says, "We can't shut it off, it's too late." Whereupon an exact instant replay occurs. The first scientist repeats, "Shut it off," etc., etc. The same instant replay happens 3 more times. Just when it starts to get boring, we see a delayed replay of the first entrance of the unknown doctor and the shot of slightly wrong middle-aged janitor, abruptly intercut with portions of the "Shut it off" dialogue. Remember in McLuhan's review of Naked Lunch, Ticket Express, Ticket to Implode or whatever, he's saying that Burroughs is advocating hitting the shut off button. So we could so these are profiles of psychological types, like on my chart. This is his version of the chart. What do you think of that, guys?
Wow.
So somebody, the almost Dan Rather, reports that As a result of their experiment, a most grievous time-space aberration has occurred, creating an irreversible chronological dysfunction. Now anything can happen. Now anything can happen at any time, from any time, and for any reason or no reason at all, with no regard for continuity, as science has just done away with it forever. Science's products do away with the visual space guidelines. So then you go into chapter 5, starts off with Carl Sagan, and Billy is hanging out as a roadie. Cecil his horse world is coming back. He's pretty excited. Then they get sent up in what's his name? Who wrote that book? No. You mentioned something he made in 1970. Roxy. Can't remember. Can't even remember what we're talking about. Why am I sitting here talking into the microphone? What am I exploring here? Just kidding. I'm on top of it. Don't worry. Back to the Oval Office, the president, as he might have looked in 1955 as a host in Death Valley days, he's now consulting with his advisors on the significance of this matter. I guess it's Billy has got on the moon. Is that where we're at? Yes. So Billy announces he's going to the moon. Then Reagan comes on. And somebody says to him, "That thing, it's in the air again." The president begins to recite the Lord's Prayer, pausing briefly to order another hot toddy. He's extremely perturbed by the possibility that the X-1 might reach the moon before the government's very own, hand-picked, corn-fed, all-American astronaut. He orders that the X-1 must be destroyed and plans for the one and only official U.S. government lunar landing be drastically accelerated. So I guess X-1 is Billy's plane. There's a montage of obviously cheap stock footage, jet fighters scrambling, radar stuff, anti-aircraft guns twirling around, factories working overtime, 1930s-style telephone operators violently jabbing at overloaded switchboards, etc. So we get into a suburban scene with Alan, has a home in Encino, works for famous international pictures, and he's got ridiculous kids and a ridiculous wife who eventually wants a divorce. Ghostly occurrences. Here's an item treated in a humorous way by the newscaster regarding ghostly occurrences in Palo Alto, ending with one of those horrible lighthearted news comments about the number of shopping days left before Halloween. I think I had something Frank was going to say about that. During a pause in Horace's computations, we hear this delightful sounds of his enthusiastic crystal lunch consumption over the intercom, followed by a series of even more disgusting sound effects, crunching bone matter and tearing human tissue mingled with agonized groans vaguely reminiscent of the transformation sequences in the movie American Werewolf in London. Are you guys still with us?
Yes.
Yeah, did you? No, you didn't get knocked out, did you, Eliza? I mean, Roxy. Is that you, Roxy, right there?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, you
I
got
dropped out.
Right. Do you have anything you want to say about what we're saying here? We're getting into cocaine decisions, so we're getting into the 80s here, and the characters in this big extravaganza are Buddy, Uncle Willie, the Dummy, Abraham Lincoln, Father Riley B. Jones, Old Zircon, The Real Jesus, Hertzberg and Bemelmans, Hitler, Billy, Cecil and Larry, Muammar Gaddafi, all dressed to look like screenwriters, costume and set designers, directors and cameramen, etc. So we're getting this Hollywood executive, who's Alan, who's a disaster in his family, and doing a lot of cocaine decisions. So in Chapter 6, look at this. We cut to the interior of a special effects warehouse. As we pan around the room, we notice, haphazardly stored in a corner, the incredibly fraudulent papier-mâché spider from Missile to the Moon. So the spider is now just papier-mâché, the spider motif. That's how it appears anyways. Alan is talking to Roger, who is negotiating a rental deal on a used giant squid, loudly defending its maneuverability, efficiency, and seaworthiness. Roger shows traces of light green clown hair. Gretchen, Alan's wife, her toenails are dripping with flesh-colored beige enamel. We hear her humming her favorite parts of the Zappa song, Baby Take Your Teeth Out, as she works. Then this is early 80s when people were getting word processors. So on the desk is the newest, most advanced, most expensive word processor in Hollywood. It doesn't say whose office it is, unless later. Now we come to Harry. He wants to look at Channel 13 so he can watch the rubber tongue when it comes out of the puffed and flatulent Mexican rubber goods mask next time they show the movie The Bernuca. So he's buying CDs and videos. Francine. Alan shrinking at Francine for some reason. Or just yelling out her name. I think that's his secretary. Reference to Elephant Man. The movie tonight is Steaming Poop Shoot. So Barney and his wife have these little projects going. Florence, the wife Florence, another wife, enters carrying a tray with cookies and 2 tall glasses of milk with long straws in them, announcing Din Din. So the kid Jimmy with his father Barney, and the mother is, I guess, Florence. Yes, Barney. No, we did Barney way back there. No, that was Buddy Wilson. So Barney's a new guy. Barney is incredibly ugly. Did I get that right? He has been affected by the AIDS virus through Galut Colonia, which we're going to, the Thingfish theme. His family, he and his wife and son, have to wear bags over their heads. They got zapped by one of these Dr. Evil's concoctions. His son is saying, "What did you do, Dad?" Barney says, "Believe it or not, I worked the smoke machine on the last Big Kiss tour." How's that for a resume? I worked the smoke machine on the last Big Kiss tour. There's a reference to Annie Sprinkle. I don't know if you guys know who Annie Sprinkle is. Look her up. She's a porno star, entertainer, performance artist. So Jimmy, still baffled by what a Kiss tour was supposed to be, asks his father, "Well, are you still in show business now or what?" "Yes, Jimmy, I'm still in show business. You may never see me on TV or in the movies. You may never hear me on the radio or hear about my activities in the theater. But I am, even today, the most important show business figure in the entire Southern Californian area." Can you guess what he does? What does Barney do?
What?
Why would he be the most important showbiz figure? in Southern California in the early 80s. Because he's a drug dealer. He supplies the cocaine for everybody. All the executives, all the pluking executives that Frank makes fun of in Cocaine Decision. So there's a cocaine plague going on.